Danny Martinez stepped off the transport ship and looked up at the massive space station floating in the darkness. Nexus Prime was bigger than any city he had ever seen on Earth. The metal walls stretched up so high that he could not see the top. Bright lights moved along the corridors like tiny stars. Ships came and went from the docking bays, carrying soldiers and supplies from across the galaxy. He took a deep breath and picked up his small bag. Inside were all his belongings from Earth, a photo of his family, some clothes, and a small knife his grandfather had given him. The knife was nothing special, just an old hunting blade, but it reminded him of home. Danny was one of only 12 humans accepted into the Galactic Military Academy. Out of thousands who applied, only 12 made it through the tests. He still could not believe he was here. At 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighing only 140 pounds, he was not what most people expected from a soldier. The first thing Danny noticed when he walked into the academy was how small he was compared to everyone else. The hallways were built for beings much larger than humans. He had to look up to see the faces of most other cadets. Some were so tall that his head barely reached their chests. A group of Vorthic warriors walked past him. They were at least 8 feet tall with thick gray skin and muscles that looked like they could crush steel. Their eyes glowed yellow in the dim light. One of them glanced down at Danny and made a sound that might have been laughter. "Look at the tiny human," the Vorthic said to his friends. Did they accept him by mistake? Danny pretended not to hear and kept walking. He had dealt with bullies before, but never ones that could probably pick him up with one hand. The dormitory assignment board showed that Danny would be sharing a room with a Vorthic named Zektar. Danny found his room and pushed the button to open the door. Inside, he saw a massive figure sitting on one of the beds. The bed groaned under the weight. Zektar looked up when Danny entered. His yellow eyes narrowed as he studied the human. "You must be the roommate they told me about," he said. His voice was deep and rough like grinding stone. "I thought they were joking when they said I would be living with a human." "I'm Danny," he said, trying to sound confident. "Danny Martinez." "I know who you are," Zektar replied. "Everyone knows about the 12 humans who somehow got accepted. We are all wondering why the Academy would waste time training such weak creatures." Danny set his bag on the empty bed. The bed was too big for him, designed for beings twice his size. His feet would not touch the floor when he sat on it. "I passed the same tests as everyone else," he said quietly. Zektar stood up. He was nearly 9 feet tall, and his shadow covered Danny completely. "The tests must be different for humans. There is no way a creature like you could pass the same challenges as a real warrior." Danny did not answer. He had learned long ago that arguing with bullies usually made things worse. Instead, he unpacked his few belongings and tried to ignore the Vorthak's stares. The next morning, Danny attended his first combat training class. The instructor was Commander Thulvex, a Caltheran who had fought in dozens of battles across the galaxy. His body was covered in thick, armor-like skin that looked like it could stop bullets. Scars crossed his face and arms, telling stories of old fights. "Today we will practice with standard military weapons," Commander Thulvex announced. His voice echoed in the large training room. "Each of you will choose a weapon and demonstrate basic combat forms." Danny walked to the weapon rack with the other cadets. The smallest weapon was a plasma rifle designed for Caltheran soldiers. When Danny picked it up, the weight nearly knocked him over. The rifle was as long as he was tall and weighed more than 50 pounds. The other cadets had no trouble lifting weapons twice as heavy. "Having trouble, little human?" asked Brook, a Gorvani cadet whose claws could slice through metal. His thick fur was dark brown and his eyes were bright green. "Maybe you should try the children's weapons instead." Several cadets laughed. Danny felt his face turn red, but he managed to lift the rifle and point it at the training target. When he pulled the trigger, the weapon's kick sent him stumbling backward. The energy blast went wide and hit the ceiling instead of the target. More laughter filled the room. Commander Thulvex walked over and looked down at Danny. "Cadet Martinez," he said, "perhaps you should focus on maintenance duties instead of combat training. Not everyone is built for real warfare." Danny's hands shook as he set the rifle back on the rack. He had trained for 2 years on Earth to prepare for this academy. He had studied alien combat techniques and practiced with every weapon he could find. But nothing had prepared him for how different everything would be when he was surrounded by beings who were naturally stronger and faster than any human. The weeks that followed were hard for Danny, in every class. He struggled to keep up with his alien classmates. During physical training, he ran slower than everyone else. During weapons practice, he could barely lift the equipment. During tactical exercises, other cadets ignored his suggestions and made their own plans. His only friend was Lisa Chun, another human cadet who was much better at academic subjects than Danny. She was small like him, but she had a gift for understanding complex battle strategies and alien technology. The other cadets respected her intelligence, even if they questioned her physical abilities. "You cannot try to be like them," Lisa told Danny one evening as they sat in the academy's food hall. Around them, alien cadets ate meals that would feed a human family for a week. "You are human. That means you have different strengths." "What strengths?" Danny asked. He poked at his food, which was designed to be nutritious for dozens of different species but did not taste much like anything. "I am smaller than everyone else. I am weaker than everyone else. I cannot even lift their weapons properly." "Humans are survivors," Lisa said. "We have lasted this long because we are smart and we adapt. Maybe you cannot match their strength, but you can think differently than they do." Danny wanted to believe her, but it was hard when every day brought new reminders of how different he was. In the shower rooms, he had to use a step stool to reach the controls. In the dining hall, he needed both hands to lift a cup of water. During sleep cycles, he could hear Zektar making comments about his fragile human roommate to other cadets. One night, Danny could not sleep. He got up and walked through the empty corridors of the academy. Most of the station was quiet during the sleep cycle, but Danny had always been a light sleeper. He wandered deeper into the station than he had ever gone before. In the lower levels, he found an old training facility that looked like it had not been used in years. The equipment was covered in dust and some of the lights did not work. But the room was smaller than the main training areas, built for beings closer to human size. Danny found a set of practice weapons that he could actually lift. They were old but still functional. He spent the rest of the night practicing basic combat forms, working on movements that used his smaller size as an advantage rather than a weakness. For the first time since arriving at the academy, Danny felt like he might actually belong here. He was not going to become a giant overnight, but maybe he could find his own way to be a warrior. Maybe Lisa was right about humans being survivors. Maybe being different was not the same as being weak. As the station's artificial sun began to rise, Danny put the practice weapons away and headed back to his room. He had found something in that abandoned training facility, something that gave him hope. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight he had discovered that maybe, just maybe, he had what it took to succeed in his own way. 3 months had passed since Danny first arrived at the academy. He had spent every night in the abandoned training facility, working on his own style of fighting. His movements were getting faster and more precise. He could now handle weapons designed for smaller species. Though they were still rare in the academy's arsenal, during the day, Danny attended regular classes with the other cadets. The mockery had not stopped, but it had become background noise. He focused on learning everything he could about alien combat techniques, even if he could not copy them exactly. Lisa often helped him study, and together they had become quite good at tactical planning. One morning, Commander Thulvex called all cadets to the main assembly hall. The massive room was filled with hundreds of alien warriors from dozens of species. Danny and Lisa sat near the back as usual. The commander's voice boomed across the hall. "Attention all cadets," Commander Thulvex announced. "The time has come for the great hunt. This is the final test that will determine who among you is worthy to become a true galactic warrior." A murmur of excitement went through the crowd. Danny had heard about the great hunt from older cadets. It was a survival exercise that every cadet had to complete before graduation. Many cadets spoke of it with both excitement and fear. You will be taken to the planet Kethmoran, the commander continued. This is a death world where only the strongest survive. You will have 2 weeks to prove yourselves while being hunted by our training units. Danny felt a chill run down his spine. A death world meant a planet where the environment itself was trying to kill you. He had studied such worlds in his classes, but he had never imagined he would actually visit one. The training units are Shadowclaw predators, Commander Thulvek said. These creatures have been enhanced to provide the ultimate challenge. They are faster than you, stronger than you, and they never stop hunting. Your job is to survive. The commander's eyes swept across the room. You will be divided into teams of 4 cadets each. These teams will include different species to test your ability to work together. The teams have already been chosen. Denny listened as the commander read out the team assignments. When his name was called, he felt his stomach drop. He was assigned to Team 7 with Zektar, his Vorthak roommate, Brooke, a Gorvani warrior, and Shitex, a Kaltheran engineer. After the assembly, Danny met with his teammates in a small briefing room. Zektar looked annoyed when he saw Danny approach. Great, Zektar said. I get stuck with the weakest cadet in the academy. This is going to be a disaster. Brooke the Gorvani was even less welcoming. His green eyes glowed with anger as he looked at Danny. Why did they put a human on our team? We are supposed to be warriors, not babysitters. Chitex, the Kaltheran engineer, was more practical but equally dismissive. The human will slow us down, he said. Perhaps he should find a place to hide while we handle the real challenges. Danny tried to speak up. I can help with the survival aspects. I have studied the environment of Kethmoran and I think I can contribute to the team. You think? Zektar laughed. Thinking is not enough on a death world. You need strength, speed, and the ability to fight. You have none of those things. The next day, all teams were loaded onto transport ships and taken to Kethmoran. Danny looked out the window as they approached the planet. It was covered in thick green jungle that stretched from pole to pole. Storm clouds swirled around the surface, and he could see lightning flashing in the atmosphere. Beautiful, is it not? Chutek said, though his voice was sarcastic. Acid rain, poisonous plants, and predators that can kill you in dozens of different ways. When they landed, Danny immediately felt the difference. The gravity on Kethmoran was stronger than Earth's gravity. Each step required more effort. The air was thick and humid, and it smelled of rotting vegetation and sulfur. The other members of his team seemed less affected by the conditions. Zektar and Brooke were strong enough that the extra gravity barely slowed them down. Chutex's armored skin protected him from the harsh environment. Danny was the only one who seemed to be struggling. Already having problems, little human? Brooke asked. We have not even started the real challenge yet. Danny wiped sweat from his forehead and adjusted his equipment pack. I will be fine, he said, though he was not sure if that was true. The team received their mission briefing from the academy instructors. They would be dropped at random locations across the jungle and would need to survive for 2 weeks. The Shadowclaw predators would be released after the first day, giving each team time to establish a base camp. Remember, the instructor said, these are training exercises. The Shadowclaws are programmed to test you, not to kill you. However, this is still a death world. The environment itself is deadly enough. Danny's team was dropped near a river that ran through the jungle. The water looked clean, but Danny knew from his studies that it contained chemicals that could burn through most materials. The plants around the river were beautiful but deadly. Many of them released toxins that could kill a human in minutes. We need to find high ground, Danny suggested. The river will flood during the storm season and we need to avoid the toxic plants near the water. Zektar ignored him and began setting up camp near the river. Water is water, he said. We need to stay close to it. The human is right about the plants, Chitek said, surprising Danny. My sensors show high levels of toxins in the vegetation near the water, Brooke snorted. Fine, we will move away from the river, but I still do not trust the human's judgment. They moved their camp to a clearing on higher ground. Danny helped set up their shelter, though his teammates did most of the heavy work. As night fell, the jungle came alive with strange sounds. Creatures howled in the distance, and Danny could hear the sound of something large moving through the trees. "The Shadow Claws will be released tomorrow," Zektar said as he checked his weapons. "When they come, we will fight them using standard military tactics. The humans should stay in the camp and try not to get in our way." Danny wanted to argue, but he knew his teammates would not listen. Instead, he volunteered to take the first watch. While the others slept, he studied the jungle around their camp. He noticed things his teammates had missed. The scratch marks on trees that showed where predators had marked their territory. The paths through the underbrush that animals used to move from place to place. The sounds that meant danger and the sounds that meant safety. When morning came, Danny tried to share what he had learned. "I think there are already predators living in this area," he said. "These markings on the trees look fresh." "Those are just normal jungle animals," Brooke said. "Nothing we cannot handle." "But what if the Shadow Claws are not the only predators we need to worry about?" Danny asked. Zektar laughed. "You worry too much, little human. We are trained warriors. We can handle whatever this jungle throws at us." That afternoon, their confidence was tested. Danny was gathering wood for their fire when he heard a sound that made his blood run cold. It was a low growling noise that seemed to come from everywhere at once. He looked around but could not see anything. "Did you hear that?" he called to his teammates. "Hear what?" Zektar asked. Then Danny saw it. A shadow moving through the trees, too fast to be natural. It was huge, at least as big as a grizzly bear, but it moved with the grace of a cat. Its skin seemed to shimmer and change color, making it almost invisible against the jungle background. "Shadow Claw," Danny whispered. The creature attacked without warning. It leaped from the trees straight at Brooke, who was standing near the camp's edge. The Gorvani warrior raised his weapon, but the creature was faster. Its claws raked across Brooke's chest, tearing through his thick fur and leaving deep wounds. Zektar and Chitex joined the fight. Using the tactics they had learned in the academy, they spread out and tried to surround the creature. But the Shadow Claw was too smart for that. It moved like liquid shadow, attacking from unexpected angles and disappearing before they could counter-dash attack. Danny watched the fight with growing alarm. His teammates were brave and strong, but they were fighting the creature like it was a normal enemy. They were not considering its intelligence or its hunting instincts. "It is playing with us," Danny realized. "It is not trying to kill us. It is studying us." The Shadow Claw proved Danny right by suddenly breaking off the attack and vanishing into the jungle. Brooke was badly hurt, and Chitex's armor was cracked, but they were all alive. "Where did it go?" Zektar asked, looking around wildly. Danny was already moving, following barely visible tracks in the soft earth. "It is not gone," he said. "It is still hunting us." Danny followed the tracks through the jungle while his teammates tended to their wounds. The Shadow Claw had left marks in the soft earth, but they were strange marks. They did not look like the tracks of a creature running away. They looked like the tracks of a creature that was circling back. "Where are you going, human?" Zektar called after him. "I want to see where it went," Danny replied, not looking back. He crouched down and studied the ground more carefully. The tracks were fresh, maybe only minutes old, but there was something else. Other tracks, smaller ones, leading in the same direction. Danny felt a chill run down his spine. These were not the tracks of one creature. They were the tracks of a family. He hurried back to camp where his teammates were arguing about what to do next. Brooke was sitting against a tree, pressing bandages against his wounds. Chitex was trying to repair his cracked armor with a portable welder. Zektar was cleaning his weapons and muttering about cowardly creatures that attacked from hiding. "We need to leave this area," Danny said as soon as he reached them. "Right now? Leave?" Zektar looked at him like he was crazy. "We just fought off one of their training beasts. We proved we can handle them. Why should we run?" "Because it was not alone," Danny said. There are more of them, at least 2, maybe 3, and I do not think they are training beasts. Brooke laughed, though it turned into a cough that brought up blood. Now the human is seeing monsters everywhere. One creature attacked us and ran away? That proves we are stronger than it is. No, Danny said, his voice urgent. It did not run away. It was testing us, learning how we fight. And the tracks I followed show that it went back to others of its kind. Chudex looked up from his armor repairs. The Academy said there would be shadow claws on this planet. They are part of the training exercise. What if the Academy is wrong? Danny asked. What if these creatures are not part of the training? What if they are wild animals that live on this planet? Zektar stood up, his full height making him tower over Danny. You are a coward, he said. One little fight and you want to run and hide. This is exactly why humans do not belong in the military. Danny felt anger rising in his chest, but he forced it down. Getting angry would not help his teammates understand the danger they were in. I am not being a coward, he said calmly. I am trying to keep us alive. That creature was not behaving like a training beast. It was behaving like a wild predator protecting its territory. Protecting its territory from what? Chetex asked. From us, Danny said. From intruders who do not belong here. The argument was interrupted by a sound from the jungle. It was the same growling noise they had heard before, but now it was coming from multiple directions. Danny grabbed his weapon and looked around frantically. They are back, he whispered this time. 2 shadow claws attacked at once. They moved with perfect coordination, one coming from the left and one from the right. Danny's teammates spread out and began firing their weapons, but the creatures were too fast. They used the thick jungle vegetation as cover, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. Danny watched the attack and realized something his teammates had missed. The creatures were not trying to kill them, they were trying to drive them away. Every attack pushed the team further from the center of the clearing, toward the edge of the jungle. They want us to leave, Danny shouted over the sound of weapon fire. They are trying to make us run. Then we will show them we do not run, Zektar roared back. He charged toward one of the creatures, his massive weapon blazing with energy. Blasts, the shadow claw easily avoided Zektar's attack and struck back with its claws. The Vorthex's thick skin protected him from serious injury, but the creature's claws left deep scratches across his chest. Zektar stumbled backward. Surprised by the creature's speed, Chutex tried to use his armor's built-in weapons, but the shadow claws were too smart. They stayed in the shadows where his targeting systems could not lock onto them. When he fired blindly into the jungle, he only succeeded in starting small fires that filled the air with smoke. Brooke was too injured to fight effectively. He could barely stand, let alone battle creatures that moved like lightning. The Gorvani warrior tried to help, but his wounds were slowing him down. Danny realized that his teammates were going to get themselves killed if they kept fighting this way. The creatures were too smart, too fast, and too coordinated, but they were not trying to kill, they were trying to communicate. Stop fighting, Danny yelled. Everyone stop fighting. Are you insane? Zektar shouted back. They are trying to kill us. No, they are not, Danny said. He lowered his weapon and stepped toward the center of the clearing. If they wanted to kill us, we would already be dead. The Shadow Claws seemed to sense the change in Danny's behavior. They stopped attacking and melted back into the jungle shadows, but Danny could still feel their eyes watching him. What are you doing? Chutex asked, his voice tight with fear. Danny moved slowly toward the edge of the clearing, following the path that led deeper into the jungle. I am going to find out what they want, he said. Against his teammates' protests, Danny walked into the jungle. He moved carefully, making no sudden movements. He could sense the Shadow Claws following him, but they did not attack. Instead, they seemed to be leading him somewhere. After walking for about 10 minutes, Danny came to a small clearing hidden deep in the jungle. In the center of the clearing was a large tree with a hollow at its base. Inside the hollow, Danny could see movement. Small shapes, about the size of house cats, were playing in the shadows. Cubs, The Shadow Claws had cubs. Danny suddenly understood everything. The creatures were not part of the Academy's training program. They were wild animals that had been living on this planet long before the Academy started using it for exercises. The clearing where his team had made camp was part of their territory, and the adult Shadow Claws were protecting their young. "Your parents," Danny said softly to the shadows around him. "You're just trying to protect your babies." One of the adult Shadow Claws stepped out of the shadows. It was massive, easily 8 feet long and covered in muscles that rippled under its camouflaged skin. Its eyes were intelligent and alert, watching Danny with the same careful attention that Danny was watching it. Danny slowly reached into his pack and pulled out a piece of food. It was a protein bar from his emergency supplies. He held it out toward the creature, then placed it on the ground and stepped back. The Shadow Claw approached cautiously. It sniffed the food, then looked back at Danny. For a moment, human and predator studied each other. Then the creature picked up the food and retreated back into the shadows. Danny smiled and began walking back toward his team's camp. Now he understood what was happening. The Shadow Claws were not the enemy. They were just trying to protect their family, the same way humans would protect their own families. But when he reached the camp, he found his teammates packing their equipment in a hurry. "Where did you go?" Zektar demanded. "We thought you were dead. I found their nest," Danny said. "They have cubs. They are not training beasts. They are wild animals trying to protect their young." Brooke shook his head. "It does not matter what they are. They attacked us. We need to find a new camp far away from here. Or we could just leave their territory," Danny suggested. "Give them space to raise their cubs in peace." Kutex looked at Danny with something that might have been respect. "You think like them? Do you not, like a predator?" Danny considered the question. "Maybe humans are predators too. We just hunt differently." As they prepared to move their camp, Danny noticed something that made his blood run cold. In the distance, he could hear the sound of other teams fighting. Weapon fire echoed through the jungle, and he could hear the roars of angry creatures. "There are other teams in this area," he said. "They are fighting the Shadow Claws too." "So?" Zektar asked. "That is their problem." But Danny was already thinking ahead. If other teams were fighting the Shadow Claws, and if the creatures were really wild animals with cubs to protect, then things were about to get much more dangerous. Wild animals fought harder when they felt cornered. And if too many teams invaded their territory at once, the Shadow Claws might stop trying to drive intruders away and start trying to eliminate them completely. "We need to warn the other teams," Danny said. "Before someone gets killed." His teammates looked at him like he was crazy. But Danny was already planning his next move. He had learned something important about the Shadow Claws. Now he needed to figure out how to use that knowledge to keep everyone alive. The sound of fighting in the distance grew louder as Danny's team moved away from the Shadow Claw territory. Through the thick jungle, they could hear weapons firing and the angry roars of creatures that sounded much larger than the ones they had encountered. "We should help them," Danny said, stopping to listen to the battle sounds. "Help who?" Zektar asked. "We do not even know which team is fighting." "It does not matter which team," Danny replied. "Someone is in trouble." Brooke, who was still bleeding from his wounds, shook his head. "We have our own problems. I need medical attention and our communication equipment is damaged. We should focus on survival." Danny looked at his teammates. Brooke was right about their situation. During the fight with the Shadow Claws, their long-range communicator had been destroyed. They had no way to contact the Academy or call for rescue. Their medical supplies were running low, and they still had over a week left in the survival exercise. "Fine," Danny said. "But we need to find shelter and figure out how to survive without Academy support." Chitex pulled out a scanner and checked their surroundings. "There is a cave system about 2 kilometers from here. It might provide better protection than camping in the open." But they made their way through the jungle, with Danny taking the lead. His smaller size allowed him to move through the thick vegetation more easily than his larger teammates. He found paths that the others would have missed and avoided dangerous plants that could have poisoned them when they reached the caves. Danny was the first to notice the problem. "These caves are occupied," he said, pointing to scratch marks around the entrance. "By what?" Zektar asked, raising his weapon. Danny studied the marks more carefully. They were different from the Shadowclaw marks he had seen before. These were made by claws, but the pattern was wrong. Something else lives here, something bigger. Despite the warning, they entered the caves because Brooke was getting worse. The Govani warrior was losing too much blood, and they needed shelter to treat his wounds properly. The caves were deep and dry, perfect for a temporary base. Danny volunteered to scout the deeper sections of the cave, while his teammates set up camp near the entrance. He moved quietly through the dark tunnels, using a small light to guide his way. The caves went much deeper than he had expected, and he could hear water running somewhere in the darkness. In one of the deeper chambers, Danny made a discovery that changed everything. The floor was covered with bones. Not recent bones, but old ones that had been there for months or maybe years. Among the bones, he found pieces of metal that looked like they came from Academy equipment. Other teams have been here before, Danny realized, and they did not make it out. When he returned to the main chamber, Danny found his teammates in the middle of an argument. Zektar wanted to continue with the survival exercise as planned. Chitex thought they should try to reach the emergency pickup point. Brooke was too weak to care about either option. "We have a bigger problem," Danny said, interrupting their argument. "This cave is a hunting ground. Something has been bringing prey here for a long time. Other Academy teams have been killed here." "Impossible," Zektar said. "The Academy would not send us to a place where other cadets had died." Danny showed them pieces of the equipment he had found. The metal was clearly from Academy-issued gear, but it was old and damaged. "These are not from this year's exercises," he said. "These are from teams that came here before us." Chidex examined the metal pieces with his scanner. "These readings are consistent with Academy equipment, but they are at least 6 months old, maybe older. So what killed them?" Brooke asked weakly. "Before Danny could answer, they heard a sound from the deeper parts of the cave. It was not the growling of the Shadowclaws they had fought before. This was something else, something much larger. The sound echoed through the tunnels like the roar of a giant predator. "We need to leave," Danny said, "right now." But it was too late. A massive shape appeared at the entrance to their chamber. It was another Shadowclaw, but this one was twice the size of the ones they had fought before. Its claws were as long as Danny's arms, and its eyes glowed red in the darkness. Scars covered its body, telling the story of countless battles. "Alpha," Danny whispered. This was not a parent protecting cubs. This was a lone hunter, a creature that had claimed these caves as its own killing ground. The Alpha Shadowclaw moved into their chamber with the confidence of a creature that had never been defeated. It did not rush to attack like the others had. Instead, it studied each of them, deciding which one to kill first. Zektar raised his weapon and fired. The energy blast hit the creature in the chest, but it barely seemed to notice. The Alpha's skin was thicker than the other Shadowclaws, hardened by years of fighting. It looked at Zektar and made a sound that might have been laughter. "Our weapons are not strong enough," Chitex said, his voice filled with fear. The Alpha attacked Zektar first, moving faster than something that large should have been able to move. The Vorthek warrior tried to dodge, but the creature's claws caught him across the back. Zektar screamed and fell to the ground, bleeding heavily. Chitex tried to help, but his damaged armor slowed him down. The Alpha knocked him aside with one massive paw, sending the Caltheran crashing into the cave wall. Chitex's armor cracked further, and he did not get back up. Brooke was too weak to fight. The Gorvani warrior could barely stand, let alone battle. A creature that had just defeated 2 healthy soldiers, Danny was alone, facing a predator that could kill him with a single swipe of its claws. But instead of running or trying to fight, Danny did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He studied the creature. The Alpha Shadowclaw was old. Danny could see it in the way it moved, favoring its left side slightly. Its scars told stories of fights with other predators, other challenges. This was not just a mindless killer. This was a survivor, a creature that had lived long enough to become the top predator in its territory. "You are like me," Danny said quietly. "You are the smallest one who had to become the smartest one." The Alpha stopped its advance and looked at Danny with what might have been curiosity. Danny slowly reached into his pack and pulled out his grandfather's old hunting knife. It was tiny compared to the creature's claws, but Danny held it with the confidence of someone who knew how to use it. "I am not going to run," Danny said, "and I am not going to beg. If you want to kill me, you will have to work for it." The Alpha Shadow Claw tilted its massive head, studying this small creature that was not afraid. In its long life it had faced many different types of prey. Most ran, some fought. But none had ever stood their ground with such calm determination. Danny began to move, not toward the creature or away from it, but in a circle around the chamber. He moved like a predator himself, looking for weaknesses, watching for opportunities. The Alpha watched him move and recognized something familiar in the human's behavior. "You know what I am," Danny said as he continued to circle. "You can smell it on me. I am a hunter just like you." The Alpha Shadow Claw made a low rumbling sound deep in its throat. It was not the sound of anger or hunger. It was the sound of recognition. This small creature was not prey. It was something else entirely. Danny stopped moving and looked directly into the creature's red eyes. "We do not have to fight," he said. "This is your territory. I respect that. But my friends are hurt. Let us leave, and we will not bother you again." For a long moment, predator and human stared at each other. The Alpha Shadow Claw had lived for many years by trusting its instincts. And right now, its instincts were telling it that this small human was more dangerous than he appeared. The creature made its decision. Instead of attacking, it stepped aside, clearing a path to the cave entrance. It watched as Danny helped his injured teammates to their feet and slowly led them out of the caves. As they reached the entrance, Danny turned back to look at the Alpha one more time. "Thank you," he said. The massive creature nodded once, a gesture of respect between two apex predators. Then it disappeared back into the darkness of its cave, leaving Danny and his team alone in the jungle. Danny helped his injured teammates through the jungle as they moved away from the Alpha's cave. Zektar could barely walk after the creature's attack, and Chitex's damaged armor made every step difficult. Brooke was getting weaker by the hour, his wounds refusing to heal properly in the humid jungle air. "We need to find help," Danny said, looking at his teammates with growing concern. "The emergency pickup point is still 5 days away, and I do not think we can make it that far." "There is no help coming," Zektar said through gritted teeth. "Our communicator is broken. The Academy thinks we are doing fine in our survival." "Exercise." Danny helped Zektar sit down against a large tree. The Vorthek warrior's wounds were deep but not life-threatening. Chitex would survive if they could find replacement parts for his armor, but Brooke was in real danger. The Gorvani needed medical attention soon or he might not survive. "I have an idea," Danny said. "But you are not going to like it." "What kind of idea?" Chitex asked. Danny looked back toward the caves they had just left. "The Alpha Shadow Claw knows this jungle better than we do. It has been hunting here for years. It might know where to find help." Zektar stared at Danny like he had lost his mind. "You want to go back to the creature that almost killed us?" "It did not try to kill us," Danny said. "It could have killed all of us easily, but it chose not to." "That means something." "It means we were lucky," Brooke said weakly. Danny shook his head. "No, it means the Alpha recognized something in me, something that made it decide we were not enemies." Despite his teammates' protests, Danny decided to return to the caves alone. He left them hidden in a safe location and made his way back through the jungle. The Alpha's scent was easy to follow, and Danny found himself moving with the same quiet confidence he had learned during his hunting trips with his grandfather. When he reached the cave entrance, Danny called out softly, "I know you are in there. I need your help." For a moment, there was no response. Then the massive shape of the Alpha Shadow Claw appeared in the cave mouth. Its red eyes fixed on Danny, and it made a low, questioning sound. "My friends are dying," Danny said simply. "I do not know this jungle like you do." Is there a place where they can get help? The Alpha studied Danny for a long time. Then, to Danny's surprise, it stepped out of the cave and began walking into the jungle. Danny followed, staying several steps behind the massive predator. The Alpha led Danny through parts of the jungle he had never seen before. They passed through hidden valleys and across streams that did not appear on any Academy maps. The creature moved with the confidence of an animal that knew every tree and rock in its territory. After walking for over an hour, they reached a clearing where Danny saw something unexpected. It was an old Academy research station, partially hidden by jungle growth. The building looked like it had been abandoned for years, but lights were still glowing in some of the windows. There are people here, Danny realized. The Alpha Shadowclaw stopped at the edge of the clearing and looked back at Danny. It made a soft, rumbling sound, almost like a purr, then melted back into the jungle shadows. Danny approached the research station carefully. The building was old but still functional. When he knocked on the main door, it opened to reveal a human woman in a faded Academy uniform. "Who are you?" she asked, raising a weapon. "How did you find this place?" "My name is Danny Martinez. I am a cadet from the Academy. My teammates are injured and need medical help." The woman studied Danny's face, then lowered her weapon. "I am Dr. Kate Williams. I was stationed here 3 years ago to study the local wildlife. When my research term ended, I chose to stay." Danny looked around the station. It was well equipped with medical facilities and supplies. "Can you help my friends?" "Bring them here," Dr. Williams said. "But first, tell me how you found this place. It is not on any Academy maps." Danny explained about the Alpha Shadowclaw and how it had led him to the station. Dr. Williams listened with growing amazement. "The Alpha led you here?" she asked. "That is impossible. That creature has killed dozens of Academy cadets over the years. It hates anything connected to the Academy." "Maybe it does not hate the Academy," Danny said. "Maybe it just hates being invaded." Dr. Williams helped Danny retrieve his teammates. When they brought Brooke to the medical facility, she immediately began treating his wounds. Zektar and Chitex would recover with rest and proper care. "You saved our lives," Zektar said to Danny as he lay in a medical bed. "I owe you an apology. I was wrong about humans." "We all were," Chitex added. "You think differently than we do, but that does not make you weak." While his teammates recovered, Danny spent time with Dr. Williams learning about the planet's real history. The Academy had been using Kethmoran for training exercises for over 10 years, but they had never bothered to study the creatures that already lived there. "The Shadowclaws are not just animals," Dr. Williams explained. "They are intelligent predators with complex social structures. The Academy's training exercises have been disrupting their territories and killing their young. That is why they attack the cadets," Danny realized. "They are defending their homes." 3 days later, rescue ships arrived to pick up the Academy teams. Danny's team was found at the research station, healthy and well-fed. Other teams had not been so lucky. Several cadets had been seriously injured, and one team was still missing. When they returned to the Academy, Danny found himself famous. Word had spread about the human cadet who had made contact with the Alpha Shadowclaw and lived to tell about it. Other cadets who had once mocked him now looked at him with respect. Commander Thelvex called Danny to his office a week after their return. "Cadet Martinez," he said, "your performance on Kethmoran was extraordinary. You showed leadership, tactical thinking, and survival skills that surpassed many of our senior cadets." Danny stood at attention. "Thank you, sir." "I am assigning you to teach a new course," the commander continued. "Psychological warfare and predator tactics. It seems you understand something about fighting that we have been missing." Danny's new position changed everything. Instead of struggling to keep up with alien combat techniques, he was now teaching other cadets how to think like predators. His classes became the most popular in the Academy. Attended by cadets from dozens of different species, Zektar was one of his first students. The Vorthic warrior had completely changed his opinion about humans after their experience on Kethmoran. "Teach me to see what you see," he asked Danny. Teach me to think like a hunter. Lisa Chun was promoted to tactical analysis instructor, and together she and Danny developed new training programs that combined human psychological insights with alien military technology. Their methods proved so effective that academies on other worlds began requesting their curriculum. 6 months later, Danny received his first real military assignment. He was chosen to lead a mixed-species reconnaissance team on a dangerous mission behind enemy lines. His team included volunteers from every major species in the Galactic Alliance, all eager to learn from the human who could think like their enemies. On the day they shipped out, Danny received an unexpected message. It came from Dr. Williams at the research station on Kethmoran. She had been monitoring the Alpha Shadowclaw's territory and had discovered something remarkable. The Alpha had begun protecting other human cadets who entered its territory. It could somehow identify humans by scent and would drive away other predators that threatened them. The creature had claimed all humans as members of its pack, recognizing them as fellow apex predators worthy of respect. Danny smiled as he read the report. He had found his place in the galaxy not by trying to be like other species, but by embracing what made humans unique. He was small compared to his alien allies, but he possessed something that no amount of size or strength could match: the mind of a predator that had evolved to survive by thinking rather than fighting. As his ship left the Academy for its first mission, Danny looked back at the space station where his journey had begun. He was no longer the smallest cadet who did not belong. He was a teacher, a leader, and a warrior who had earned his place among the stars by proving that sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one that does not look dangerous at all. The Alpha Shadowclaw had recognized him as a brother not because of his size or strength, but because of something deeper: the instinct to survive, to adapt, and to protect those who needed protection. That was what made humans apex predators in a galaxy full of larger, stronger beings, and Danny Martinez had shown them all what that really meant.